Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to another Sunday. We're here in San Diego. It is a massive heat wave. Of course, here in San Diego, in the Goldilocks zone, it's now, upper 70s. The rest of the world is floating away because tornadoes and rainstorms and flash floods. Here we get a nice rain that we normally don't get, and all the flowers start coming out and everything gets green. So today we are talking about sound. And the kind of sounds I'm talking about have to do with extraordinary sounds, sounds that you wouldn't normally come across, sounds that are esoteric sounds, sounds that are hidden from view, hidden from the ear. You have to stretch to find these sounds. You have to do a mathematical calculation, or you have to shoot something up into space to gather them, or you have to extrapolate from information you get from radio telescopes, or dig into the ancient past to see what has been done in the past. In some cases, some of these are the kind of things that I've stumbled upon myself. Primordial sounds, which I've discussed before. There will be a few things in this broadcast today that I have just covered before, but in this case, I'm mentioning them in the larger context of esoteric sounds, and they really should be included. So I always have in mind the fact that each one of these broadcasts has a certain number of people who are new, who have not been here before. So I always try to be a little mindful of, even though I may have covered some of these things in the past, whenever I refer to things I've covered in the past, it's always sort of from a different angle and a different piece that you hadn't heard before. In some cases, when you had heard it before, you heard it a year or two ago, and it's always good to poke a stick into your brain and poke those areas that help to wake you up. So with that being said, this whole concept and idea of esoteric sounds, sounds that have extra meaning at an unconscious level, sounds that would cause some new kind of experience to take place that would be out of the ordinary when you heard them, sounds that would have a deeper effect on the unconscious mind and wake something up that hadn't been awake before. The concept of sound waves impacting my body directly, and sound waves activating my inner ear mechanisms through the sense of hearing and the sense of vibration sense and things like that. Many of these esoteric sounds you wouldn't know, you wouldn't get the complete experience unless you delivered these sounds directly into your body, which was the reason why I invented the sound chair and the sound table in a very specific type of configuration that's right-left stereo to match headphones, so I could deliver the low-end frequencies directly into your cells as a physical experience, which in itself is classified as an esoteric sound experience that you normally wouldn't have. The closest that you would be able to get to that would be going to an extremely loud rock and roll concert, where the loudness and the bass drum and the bass guitar, you feel it in your chest, you feel it in your bones vibrating. But in order to get that level of vibration in your physical body, the volume level in general has to be extremely loud, which would cause damage to your hearing. So the concept of building a sound table or a sound chair with specially designed low frequency transducers that are designed to only deliver the low frequency sounds that activate your sense of touch, your sense of vibration sense in your body. By having you lay on top of a sounding board that these transducers are attached to that's upholstered. So you're laying right on top of the speaker, and sound travels through water 5 times better than air, and travels through a solid 5 times better than water. The body is 70% water, and the rest is bone and ligament and tendon solids. So the body is a perfect medium for transmitting sound. So if we apply that sound directly onto your body, then we are 25 times more effective in getting a big experience in my body without having to turn the volume way up to get that same experience through air, through big speakers in a rock concert that are using air molecules to make this vibrate. The most inefficient way of getting the vibration sense to really rock and roll in your body, so to speak. So that means if you're laying on the top of a sound table or a sound chair, and we can turn the volume up so you're really vibrating here, but it's not very loud in the room, because we've engineered it scientifically to maximize into your body as an experience and not be in the room as a sound, for practical purposes. Because if you're using sound therapy in a room in a clinic, you don't want to be disturbing everybody else in other rooms, or the room right next door, or a high-tech relaxation center where you've got multiple rooms with multiple chairs in each room, and various people having different sound experiences in each room are not going to bleed off into the next room and cause some kind of disturbance. So I'm going to start with space sounds. Now, there's an esoteric sound if I ever heard one. This is Uranus. I first of all came in touch with the space sounds after I had, you know how one thing leads to another. So I was in practice in Virginia for 7 years. I had the largest holistic health center in the state there. And in that facility, we had nurses and front desk personnel and a staff, and a very modern, super modern looking facility. We had all kinds of different treatment rooms. We were doing all kinds of advanced work. We were doing advanced work with biomagnetic therapies, laser acupuncture, advanced forms of applied kinesiology and cranial sacral work, and low force chiropractic work, a lot of different, everything that we could pack under one roof is what we were up to. That was the environment that I began exploring sound waves as a healing tool. And as that marched forward over the years, I was there for 8 years, it started to become obvious that the sound work was more powerful than everything else I was using combined. Particularly once I got to the point where I was testing certain sound frequencies on the brain itself, on the control centers in the brain that tell all the other systems in the body what it's supposed to be doing. The master control system in the brain is the autonomic nervous system. When I began that exploration and saw the results, I now realized that this is what I should be doing full time, that I should be honing all my attention, researching this effect. And that led me to sell my house and sell my practice in Virginia and move to California, where they don't arrest you for those kind of crazy ideas. establish a big center here in San Diego, and it was a big success. And I made a lot of press and news stories and television interviews and magazines and newspapers and all the rest, and came to the attention of a lot of different people who came through this big center I'd put together. And one of the people that came through because of that was a lead scientist at TRW, a guy named Roland Beanham. We became good friends, but he had called me up and asked me if I would be interested in having a deeper discussion with him about these recordings that had come back from space, sound recordings from space, from the Voyager 1 and 2 spacecraft. And it turns out that NASA was aware that from other missions that there were vibrational frequencies in the ionosphere of each planet in our solar system that were exactly within the range of human hearing, 20 to 20,000 hertz. There was sound there, but it's a vacuum in space, so sound can't transmit through space. So it's not that there's no sound in space because it's a vacuum. There's no air in space to transmit the sound to your ear. So they devised a way for Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 to pass through these areas of the planet's ionosphere and collect and record these sounds and send them back to Earth. The sounds are actually interactions between the solar wind and the electromagnetic envelope of the planet. So let's take Earth, for instance. Earth has got an atmosphere, has an ionosphere, which is an electromagnetic envelope around the planet, and it's the ionosphere, the space between the ionosphere and the Earth's surface, which forms electromagnetic frequencies trapped there, which form what's called the Schumann resonance, which we've also discussed before. The resonance of electromagnetic energy trapped in the Schumann space is 7.83 hertz, a borderline brainwave state between alpha and theta. So when these sounds came back from space, they were pretty mind-blowing. As a matter of fact, Roland first found about it at TRW. One of the scientists from another department came over and said, "Have you heard about the space sound thing?" And he's going, "Space sounds? What's that?" And he's going, "It's from the Voyager mission. They're collecting interactions between the solar wind, which is a plasma, which fourth state of matter. The sun is exploding with these force waves coming out, and it's so powerful it strips the atoms into their component parts, protons, electrons, and neutrons, floating free. Now we have charged particles, positively charged and negatively charged particles that are swimming around in sort of a liquidy type of gaseous fourth state of matter. And when the solar wind comes out from the sun and it strikes, say, the Earth's atmosphere, it blows the whole electromagnetic envelope back like a comet tail from the sun. So powerful. And the ions from the solar wind are resonating with the ions in the ionosphere, and they're vibrating, and the vibration is exactly within the range of human hearing, 20 to 20,000 hertz. So that's what they were there to try to pick up from Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus and Neptune and the moons and the rings and all the rest with Voyager 1 and 2. And so he came to my office. It's 1988. with these cassette tapes. This is before CDs. Everything was on cassette tape. And these were high-end cassette tapes called metal cassette tapes. Required a special recorder to play them back, which I had, because I'm the sound meister, right? So he brought those, and the very first one I ever listened to is the sound I'm about to play, which was recordings taken from the rings of Uranus. Uranus is a funny planet. It's a gas planet, and it's the only planet in the solar system with its rings are vertical instead of horizontal like all the rest. And so I put headphones on and listened to this sound. It sort of completely blew my mind, and I was never the same after I heard that sound. And that launched a project where we were instrumental in getting these space sounds, or certain of these space sounds that we helped to choose at TRW, to be released to us, not the public at large. For some reason, we got dibs on the solar system, and the universe passed all these space sounds directly to me. No one else has ever had them, even, and so that was 1988. We produced 11 soundtracks, which eventually went on CD, of the space sounds of the outer planets of the solar system. So here we go with, put your headphones on. Here we go with rings of Uranus. Here we go. Amazing. So that was the first thing I heard, and it just completely blew my mind. And I have to say that just the week before, I had been experimenting with brand new sound equipment that I had bought for my recording studio, a brand new type of keyboard called a sampling keyboard. Sampling keyboard, you can plug a microphone into the back and record any kind of sound and spread it across the keys and play that sound. So I was experimenting with Tibetan bowls and putting a 6-inch bowl into my keyboard, spreading it out, and having a Tibetan bowl symphony. But when I play that bowl lower and lower and lower, it sounds just like these space sounds coming from Uranus. I was doing the same thing with cricket sounds and dolphin sounds and whale sounds, whale symphony, cricket symphony, and producing those as albums. And this whole genre of sounds that I was exploring that way, I was calling them primordial sounds, because my recordings of patients speaking out loud, the self-defeating belief systems that were messing them up, and playing them backwards would erase it from the subconscious mind. That was a little trick I learned from Richard Bandler in my interactions with him. He's one of the two men who invented NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. But taking a recording of somebody speaking and putting it in that keyboard and playing it faster and slower, keyed me into something weird, that human speech patterns speeded up, go through Alvin the Chipmunk, and then it sounds like birds. And if it speeded up more, it sounds like crickets, and it speeded up more, it sounds like dolphins. And so if I then explored taking cricket sounds and slowing them down, they sound like birds, and birds slowed down sound like dolphins, and dolphins slowed down sound like people, human beings, usually laughing or singing. And I began to realize this seemed to be like Jung's collective unconscious idea, that all of it is one thing, except in this case, at different speeds. Everything is one thing except at different sizes. So you get galactic nebula sizes, fractalized down to human. So in the brain, we have the connectome in the brain that looks like the supergalactic connectome. They're mirrors of each other. And down in the quantum field, we have something that looks similar, that size differences are fractalized and speed differences are fractalized in sound. That's what I was starting to see. And it was having a very deep effect on the subconscious mind. These space sounds were having amazing responses at an unconscious level. So, we produced these CDs of each of these sounds that we had been able to extract from TRW. We had Saturn and Saturn's rings, and Uranus and Neptune, and the rings of Uranus, and the moons of Uranus, Miranda, Jupiter. The sound of Jupiter was also mind-blowing. Put your headphones on. Let's listen to that one. Here's Jupiter. So, yeah, I mean, that's sort of takes you to some other realm pretty quickly. As a meditation tool, some of these space sounds are really profound. Someplace way down in your unconscious mind that it's right on the tip of your tongue. It seems really familiar, but it couldn't possibly be familiar because it's from outer space. But we know that that's an illusion. We also had, Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, really amazing, amazing stuff. Then in my friendship with Roland, we would have lunch periodically to discuss the latest crazy things in science. And at that time, gamma ray bursts these huge bursts of light energy that would come from random places in the universe and contain a brightness level and an energy level that was equal to all the stars and suns in our entire galaxy in less than a second. And nobody knew what it was. It was the biggest enigmatic thing in astrophysics at the time, making all kinds of news. So it was big in my news feeds, coming all the time. New gamma ray bursts being seen. Nobody knows what it is. So they spent a few $1 billion and they built a special observatory and shot it up into orbit specifically to observe these gamma ray bursts and try to figure out what they were. And Roland was in charge of that project. It was called the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory. And so he more than anybody in the whole world had direct access to all this data from all of these explosions coming from space. Each one had some scientific name. And I remember at that time, a gamma ray burst was captured as the most distant event that had ever been recorded in all of human history. In other words, the gamma ray burst that they saw extended back to right after the Big Bang, 300,000 years or 380,000 years after the Big Bang. That's like way, way, way back. It's like the most distant object yet discovered in the whole universe. So the call sign was for that gamma ray burst was 090423, the farthest thing ever seen. So this number became a famous number. 090423 was the gamma ray burst that's the oldest thing that's ever been seen. Now we know that there are two forms of gamma ray bursts. One is the collapse of a neutron star, and the other one is collisions of neutron stars that crash together. The explosion is so unimaginably gigantic that these gamma ray bursts come out from that explosion. And so on one of those meetings with Roland, a lunch meeting, he said we were talking about the gamma ray bursts and the fact that that had been a big thing for him. He was also in charge of the Mars rover mission, the very first one that went to Mars. He's the one that headed up that project. He gave me the original document, which is about this thick, of the entire Mars mission. All the math and all the trajectories and all of the stuff, I've got it. It's like, wow. So we're talking about this, and we're talking about 090423, the deepest one. And I was like really excited, and I wanted to know what he had to think about it and what he had as information from that. And he said, yeah, I've got it. I've got the data. I've got that burst as a waveform. So it's GRB is gamma ray burst. GRB 090423. This is what it looks like. The oldest light ever collected in the whole universe. And he was saying, I want to give you this data, and I'd like you to translate it into sound. Because I already done the space sounds, but I didn't have to do much with the space sounds. Those came to me as they are. Those were the actual recordings of the resonant vibrations of ions in the ionosphere. Put headphones on, that's what it sounds like. No extrapolation was necessary. What I had to do is I had to take, hours of recordings and edit out the retro rockets firing to keep the dish pointed towards Earth, which happened every few minutes. So I cut those things out and then spliced all the rest of it together, and I 3Dized it with a brand new system that was happening in the world at that time, the very first 3D system ever invented, called the Bedini Audio Spatial Environment, the BAS, the BASE system. We were the first to use it in a recording, and the recordings were these space sounds. So when you listen to the space sounds, they're spatialized, so to speak. They're very largely 3Dized. So I was excited to take this project on. And this resulted in weeks and weeks of intense measurements and calculations to extrapolate percentages and frequencies. Like this top peak here was 400 hertz, or actually 399.08 hertz at this point. Each of these peaks and each of these valleys turned into a frequency. And then I stacked all those frequencies together, and in X number of tracks, it's sort of each one of these frequencies got generated as a sine wave, and that sine wave is put on track 1 and track 2 and track 3 and track 4 and track 5 and track 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, 11, 12, 50, 60 tracks of these very precise sounds. And then I did a mix down, and what you end up with is this very profound esoteric sound of the oldest light ever seen, mathematically converted as precisely as possible into sound. Remember, light is electromagnetic and sound is not. Sound is a mechanical energy wave, pure energy moving through a medium. Their vibrational frequencies are measured differently because they're different things. So in order to take the light data from something like this, you have to do a mathematical conversion of the light frequency multiplied by the speed of light and some various things to convert it over so that now it's apples and apples and not apples and oranges. And then you can drop it down by the required number of octaves so you can hear it. The whole process is as scientifically precise as we could make it. Now, I already done work with the elements of the periodic table where I did exactly the same thing, converted the light spectrum, the color spectral signature of each element, converted that over and then dropped it by 40 octaves or so and generated that as sine waves to construct the sound of each element. More esoteric sound. So I already was well versed in how to do this process, and so doing it here was just grunt work. I already knew what had to be done to precisely convert these to sound. And then at the point when I had the mix down, then I had this sound. And this sound now represents, so, let's just discuss for a second. When, if I take your voice, you speaking, in this case, I was doing self-defeating belief systems. No matter how many doctors I see, I'll never get well. And record you saying that in 3D microphones, and then put it in my keyboard where I can play all kinds of different notes that will speed that up and slow it down. So that now that sentence sounds like birds, and it sounds like crickets, it sounds like dolphins, and all the rest. Or slowed down sounds like the ocean. So that only your unconscious mind can recognize what's being said. And then you hit one simple button and it reverses that. So now you're saying it backwards. And something about backwards at all kinds of different speeds that only your unconscious can recognize erases the emotional charge off that trauma, off that belief system. And then you can replace that belief system with a positive statement that replaces it. That health is my birthright, that all blockages now will be released to the natural healing forces to take over. So you erase the old one and you replace it with the new one, and you do it by speeding it up and slowing it down so only the unconscious mind is listening. And that the rational thinking mind, which is sort of like the executive secretary that doesn't allow anybody through the door to visit the president, is now out. You've snuck in the back door somehow directly to the unconscious mind by speeding up and slowing down these sounds. It means that a certain part of my unconscious mind is listening and changing me when it hears correctly. Then when I was doing that with nature sounds, crickets and birds and dolphins speeded up and slowed down, and they all sound like each other, and that also would cause a deep response in the unconscious mind. But I think it was a deeper level of the unconscious mind than my personal body unconscious mind. This was a level of the unconscious mind deeper than that, which was a level of the unconscious mind that knows how to grow a planetary ecosystem that my body grows out of. My voice speaking to me is my personal unconscious part, biological intelligence that knows how to grow my body out of 2 cells and differentiate the tissues and make it all run on automatic from the autonomic nervous system. But these nature sounds slowed down and messed around with awakens a deeper level of the unconscious mind that is a planetary level that I'm a part of. If that's so, then what are these space sounds doing from the planets? You know, a deeper level of the unconscious mind that knows how to grow a solar system that the planet grows out of, that I grow out of. So that's sort of my take on how the deepness of the experience that you have when you listen to these space sounds. And if that's so, what level of the unconscious mind is being tapped by listening to the oldest sound in the whole universe that we've ever been able to collect? The sound of this GRB 090423. What is this doing to us? Let's go there. Headphones. Let's listen to that one for a second. See what it feels like. See where it goes inside of you. See what happens as a result of listening to this sound. So here we go. Pretty crazy. Certainly puts you into a different place. That was like 1 minute. Um, so, you know, the these first sounds, this concept of sounds coming from space, sounds come from the deep cosmos. There are various astronomers who've taken radio data from radio telescopes of distant nebula and different galaxies and converted those to sound. But they do it in a different way. They sort of, you know, instead of taking all the different frequencies and stacking them together and doing a mix down so that those are harmonics and overtones of an overall sound, they play all those hundreds of different sounds where it's sort of like a musical composition of hitting all kinds of different notes, but they're all really fast and chaotic. That for me isn't the right way of doing it. Not the right way of looking at the data. That all of those frequencies that you're measuring need to be stacked together and mixed down as the timbre of an overall sound. So if we travel from the depths of the oldest sound in the whole universe and the space sound things, and then onto the planet of nature sound, speeded up and slowed down that have an effect, and then my personal voice causing an effect, then the next place to go is deeper into what this system is made of. And as I mentioned before, that's the atoms. And the atom represents the smallest particle of matter that still retains all the characteristics of that matter. So the smallest particle of gold, or the smallest particle of iron, or the smallest particle of oxygen, or whatever. We chose oxygen in this. I carried this project out with the help of a physicist who is the head of the Department of Research at the California Institute for Human Science. Back when I was a faculty member there, that was a graduate school research center, graduate school for PhDs in human science and psychotherapy. I taught 2 40-hour courses there. I'm still on the faculty. I sort of out of touch with them for a while. The school went through a lot of changes. That school is a fully accredited school worldwide, so it means the 2 courses that I taught, 2 40-hour courses. One course was behavioral psychoacoustics, the whole science behind brainwave entrainment. And the other course was clinical neuroacoustics, how you use muscle testing in particular to find frequencies for organs and glands and meridians and different specific areas of the body, how you can do emotional testing with sound waves. That course is a course that I am resurrecting again. I used to teach that course to my biotuning practitioner group who wanted to go the next step up from the sound work. So in my personal practice, the biotuning sound work, finding the frequency for the autonomic nervous system to rebalance it. So the internal physician program would fix all the things under the hood from the inside out. Me as a practitioner was helping from the outside in by testing through all the different body systems with a bunch of different methods, and then fixing everything I found to assist the internal physician to be able to do its job faster and more efficiently. So I was checking cranials and cranial sacral work and structure and organs and glands and meridians and muscle groups. A certain amount of work with subtle energy fields like polarity therapy fields. I was doing biomagnetic therapy and all of that stuff, and I rolled that all up into the same course that I taught at CIHS and taught that course with a thick manual. And I am on the verge of resurrecting that course. So if any of you are interested in taking that course, you should speak up and let us know in the Discord channel, where we have a big forum where we're all together, or contact Shri, my son, who's the CEO of our companies here. Contact him at Shri, SHEA, at neuroacoustic.com. NEURO acoustic, ACOUSTIC.com. Let him know you're interested so that we can get a feel for if we should do it or not. So when we're looking at the atom, we have two parts of the atom: the nucleus of the atom and the electron field. When I was in school 50 years ago, when I was in high school in the 60s, we learned that it was like a miniature little sun with planets orbiting around. It's not like that at all. The nucleus is extremely small, with protons and neutrons, and protons have a positive charge. And then the electrons orbiting around have three different shells that they orbit in, spherical shells. And the position of the electron and its speed cannot be measured at the same time, according to the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And that means that there's an electron cloud, a probability field of three shells of where the electron could be at any given moment of time. And there's a number of different electrons. So the number of electrons and the number of protons in the nucleus match each other. So you could have, 90 electrons in the different shells, all orbiting around, and each one of them, you don't know its location or its speed at the same time, so it becomes a probability field. However, the electrons in that field are jumping back and forth between these shells. So when an electron jumps from one shell to the next and one shell to the next, it goes into a higher energy state. And when it loses that energy, it jumps back to the lower energy shell. And then it loses more energy and jumps back into another shell. So we've got electrons jumping between shells all the time, gaining energy, moving to a higher energy shell, gaining more energy, losing energy. Every time it does one of those activities where it gains energy or loses energy, vibrational frequencies are emitted. And the frequency range of those vibrational frequencies are extremely precise, accurate to 10 decimal points, and they show as color because the vibrational field is within the color range, 400 nanometers to 750 nanometers, angstrom frequencies. Millions of cycles per second is what color is, and that's what this mechanism, the eyeball, is there to measure with the retina. So since each element has a unique set of these color spectral line signatures, like a fingerprint, it's always the same, and you can go to a US government website that will show you what all those frequencies are, accurate to 10 decimal points, and what their brightness level is. You can go and collect that data, and you can do the mathematical calculations for each one of those color lines and drop it down by 40 octaves and generate it as a sine wave and stack them all on top of each other and do a mix down and end up with the sound of oxygen or gold. We did oxygen and gold and helium and copper and iron. And this was, that's the reason I was working with a physicist in order to get this correct, because I was trying to do this as precise and scientific as possible. So once again, we've got protons and neutrons. The protons have their own frequency, which is different than the complex chord of frequencies of the electron field. For instance, elemental oxygen has 250 color lines that spin, that form its signature. Oxygen here has these 250 color lines that make oxygen, and some of them are brighter than others, and all of that data is in the government website, and you can look all of them up. So we were taking this data and converting it to sound. The proton resonance is a single resonance. And the proton resonance is what's used in magnetic resonance imaging in the medical field. So when you lay down on that sort of bed and you slide into that big tube, what that tube is doing is generating a massive magnetic field, 3 Tesla field, that if you had any kind of metal implants, it would tear it right out of your skin. So that huge magnetic field is able to cause the protons, which are positively charged, to shift their position. They're like little magnets, and putting it in a huge magnetic field makes it flip to another position. And when it does that, it releases energy. And radio wave technology is also in the MRI that is picking up that resonance that comes off the proton when it flips. And that's how you generate the picture of your inside of your body. Pretty crazy. I have the total data on all of the frequencies for all of the protons of all the elements of the periodic table as well. You can see the difference between 2 of the ones that I did. One is oxygen, one is gold. Different color lines, different brightness levels, different number of lines. Gold has less lines than oxygen does. And the mathematical formulas for the conversion of light frequencies to sound frequencies is important. So down here in the lower right corner is the formula for the conversion to convert from frequency to wavelength. Light waves in angstrom frequencies, color is measured in wavelength, and sound is measured in frequency. So that's why you have to do this mathematical conversion to convert wavelength to frequency. And then you can drop the color frequency down 40 octaves. But you can see in this sort of chart right here that we've aligned the precise scientific data of the number of angstrom frequencies converted down to a sound wave, where 392 hertz would be this color red, G. A at 440 would be this sort of an orangish color. Middle orange is 431 hertz. Middle red is 397 hertz. Middle yellow is, so if we look at these things from the standpoint of the chakras, we can see that the first chakra, the red chakra, would be at 397 hertz if you take it as middle red, dead center in the middle of the red range. Whereas, a blue color for the throat chakra would be more at this range, 598. 587 is D, so this would be D plus something. This would be G plus something, number of cents, because I can tune between G and G sharp by 100 steps with a digital readout. So, and the problem with that, of course, is that it might occur to somebody that there's an octave relationship between colors and sound, but they're an amateur and they don't quite understand that sound and color are two separate things in the universe, and they don't relate directly by octaves until you do this conversion first. And once you do the conversion, then they do relate. But if you didn't know that, and you took the color red and you dropped it 45 or 40 octaves without doing the conversion, you'd come up with the wrong color. And so when you look online and you look at all the color charts that relate what sound wave goes with which chakra, most of them are wrong. I'd say 80% of them are wrong because they made a noob mistake of not making the conversion properly because they didn't understand the science of it. They got the initial idea but didn't dig deep enough like a professional does to find out all the details so you don't make a mistake. Here we've got musical scales and earth resonances. The Pythagorean scale, the conventional musical scale based on the equal tempered scale. We've got things like the Earth's rotation, Earth's diameter that go with a certain color and a certain sound wave. Earth's rotation at 398.57 hertz. Schumann resonant at 7.83 hertz. Earth's circumference harmonic. I mean, this is for Pythagorean middle C at 512. This is all very cool stuff. I mean, it spins on and on. Here's planetary harmonic spectrums. Talk about esoteric sounds. I mean, the diameter and the rotation of Earth, orbital year, all of these spin to a color and its associated sound wave. Planetary parameter comparisons, rotations, circumference, diameters of various planets in the solar system. That means that each planet has a primary frequency and color. It's really sort of mind-blowing stuff. And all of this kind of information is another project on the shelf to be done. I'd love to pull this off and produce a whole series of sound and color renditions for each planet based on this information. This is the kind of information that Pythagoras was into. But when all is said and done, you know, we've got the rendition of, say, the color spectra element of gold, where we took the X number of color lines that are each accurate to 10 decimal points and the brightness of each color, and made all the calculations necessary to drop them all down to 40 octaves and precisely as humanly possible render that as a sound wave of gold. And so let's put some headphones on and listen to that for a minute. All right. Yeah, sorry. I had the volume level off. I didn't notice it right away. This is what elemental gold looks like as a sound wave form. This is some of my recording studio software. We can zoom into this and look at it more closely. You can see that there's a structure of harmonics and overtones inside the sound. We can do all kinds of different analysis. We can do spectral analysis to find out exactly what frequencies are present, which should be the frequencies that we added in. Elemental oxygen, this is what that looks like as a waveform, and we can zoom into that waveform as well and look at its harmonic structure. Let's listen to that for a second. So let's put on our headphones again. These things only last for about a minute. I mean, you can definitely hear a heartbeat sound. Boom, 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 in elemental oxygen. These kind of things would blow our minds. The fact that elemental oxygen, when it's precisely converted to sound, has a heartbeat in it. And the heartbeat, what does the heart do is pump oxygen around the body. It just is one of those puzzle piece things about how the mystical nature of how the universe assembles itself with metaphor and fractalization, and pretty mind-blowing. This is elemental iron. Look how different that looks. And when you zoom in on it, you can really see the structure of harmonics and overtones of elemental iron. And as I said in previous broadcasts, we did experiments at California Institute for oxygen and gold, with oxygen, playing that sound of oxygen through a sound table into your tissues could raise the blood oxygen level on a pulse oximeter on your fingertip for about 40% of the people that we did this big study with. The vibrational form of elemental oxygen was infusing the body with the vibrational form of oxygen. And oxygen is nothing but vibration anyway. It's not a real thing. You know, when you look at the atom of oxygen, it's protons, electrons, and neutrons, and they're just, when you look at them closer, they're just vibrating smaller particles, and at the bottom is nothing except vibration. So if we take the vibrational form of oxygen and pump it into your body, we should see the same result as breathing oxygen, which is precisely what we saw. Elemental gold caused a massive increase of chi energy right off the scale. It turned off the immune system. So at first it's like, oh, the good news is it boosts the healing response of chi like through the roof, and bad news is it turns off your immune system. However, there's certain indications where that would be a good thing. People with going through a flare-up of an autoimmune disease would benefit greatly by having their healing response of chi boosted through the roof while turning off their immune system so it wasn't attacking you anymore and breaking that vicious cycle. My early work was with AIDS patients to stop the immune system from activating and spreading more virus, because the immune system is being attacked by an AIDS virus and commandeering the cells of the immune system. So when your body tries to mount an immune response to defend itself, all it does is manufacture and spew out more virus. It's an insidious, horrible kind of disease. But if you could turn off the immune system completely and boost the body's healing response with Qi, with elemental gold, then you're onto something. Now if we go back to the ancient past, in India, there's this diagram. This is the Shri yantra. Shri means the king, the most revered. A yantra is a visual meditation tool. It looks something like a mandala. Mandalas were centering tools and meditation tools, but of all of them, this yantra was the king. Actually, the queen, because it was female. That's why it's Shri. Shri is the most revered, the king of all. You can see that there's these 9 triangles interlaced here, and there's 4 triangles pointing upwards and 5 pointing downwards. 4 is female, 5 is male, but the 4 always pointed up. For instance, here's one big triangle right here. Wait a second. Here's one big triangle right here. Here's another triangle right here. Here's an upwards facing triangle right here. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I coordinated with Deepak Chopra to do a presentation on the Shri yantra for one of his big workshops that he was holding here in San Diego at the Airport Sheraton here in San Diego. It was a week-long workshop, and the centerpiece of the workshop was called Seduction of a Spirit, and the centerpiece of the workshop was the Shri yantra. And he contracted with a friend of mine, Jonathan Quintin, Quintin. He's from New Zealand, an old good friend of mine. And his whole thing is sacred geometries. He's the most profound person doing a sacred geometries I've ever seen. All very precise and mathematical, and with these amazing diagrams. So when he was approached to do the visual of the Shri yantra, he contacted me to do the sound. So I was faced with doing a scientific mathematical conversion of this symbol into sound, and to make it as precise as I could scientifically. So how I approached that was, first of all, converting it into something that's easier to see. So now we can really see these triangles a lot easier. And then I go one step more where I can number each triangle. So this big triangle here is number 1 triangle. That's a number 2 triangle. This one here, the number 3 triangle here. And then the upside down triangles, like that's 3. Here's 4 is in here. 5 is this one here. 6 is the first upside down triangle. 7 is 8. Right. So, and number 9, this one right here. 9 triangles interlaced together, forming all kinds of interesting, strange patterns. The idea of the Shri yantra was to stare into the center triangle here and not blink and not move your eyes. And if you do that right now, just for a few seconds, you'll see that all of these interesting patterns start jumping around. Certain patterns jump into the foreground and recede into the background. Other ones jump forward and back and forward and back. All kinds of different pattern relationships are spinning around in your visual field. That is your subconscious mind reading the esoteric mathematics of the Shri yantra and explaining why the Shri yantra was called Shri, why it was the king of all yantras. Because the mathematics of the interlacing of all these triangles was supposed to represent all the math that the universe used to create the entire universe in one symbol. That's why this was the Shri yantra. It was supposed to bring you into a state of consciousness by doing this eyes open stare meditation, where these patterns would start to spin all over the place as your subconscious mind recognized one pattern after another and integrated them and reminded you at a super deep unconscious level of the original blueprint that your collective unconscious used to create the universe itself. And in particular, the Shri yantra was supposed to bring you into a state where where we have discussed before with the quantum physics and the Schrödinger cat paradox, that the next moment from now is the closed box. And you're going to arrive at the next moment from now, and the lid's going to fly off, and you're going to look inside to see what happened. And what's inside is not a Schrödinger cat that's either floating between dead and alive. It's every possibility that the next moment could be in an infinite field of all possibilities that all have an equal footing. But your expectation that this is what reality looks like magnetizes that particular outcome in the infinite field, and the universe is always looking for a path of least resistance to save energy, and you just supplied that. And so therefore the universe will choose what your expectation was, because that's special and unique. You just made that outcome special and unique. So if you were to change your expectation of what the next moment is going to be, then that's what the universe would produce for you. And that's what these live streams are all about. To entrain everybody's brainwaves with the power of numbers to the same exact place so that we can stand at the brink of the next moment from now and choose a new outcome through the power of consciousness and numbers in the quantum field. So how I went about converting this into sound was taking the area of the circle that encloses all 9 triangles. And the area of a circle is already a cosmic number. It's the area of pi, right? Pi is pi r squared is the formula for calculating the area of a circle inside. So I wanted to calculate the area of the circle inside. And then as soon as I got the area of the circle, I can now calculate the area of one of these triangles. Let's say triangle number 6. Now that's a different high school math formula that I actually had to look it up. But you calculate the area of one triangle, and then you relate it to the area of the circle as a ratio. And a ratio from one thing to the next is what music is all about, right? When you look at that grand piano back there, all those white and black keys that go along is a ratio of one frequency to the next frequency. The white key to the black key to the white key to the white key to the black key to the white key to the black key. Those are ratios of frequencies that relate mathematically to each other in harmonic values that we call music. music theory. So the ratio and a relationship between frequencies is what music theory is all about, and the universe uses the math of that to create everything. All of it is based on harmonic, overtone, octave relationships that make everything what it is, all the way to the subatomic level in a quantum field. So if I could go through every single triangle here and calculate the area of every single triangle and take that number and relate it to the area of the circle that is common to all of them, then I get frequencies. If all I have to do now is to render the area of the circle is a frequency, right? Let's say that the area of the circle I'm going to pretend is 100 hertz. That means the area of the largest number one triangle here, this number one triangle, is 39.8% of the area of the circle that encloses it. So if the circle is 100 hertz, what's 39.8% of 100 hertz? It's another frequency. That's very precise, accurate to a couple of decimal points. So the whole mathematical conversion of this symbol actually turned out to be pretty simple, as long as you had a circle going around it and you knew the value of pi, 1.3416. That gave me the ability to convert that symbol into sound. And as soon as I could convert it into sound, now I've got 10 sounds, 9 triangles, and the sound for the circle based on pi. I had successfully, highly precisely, and mathematically converted this ancient symbol, the highest, most revered symbol of meditation, into sound. As soon as I've got sounds for each one of the triangles, then I can do the same conversion the other way around. I can multiply it up by 40 octaves and generate what color would go with that. So that's how I came up with these colored Shri yantras that I was doing for individuals. This is the one that I did for Louise Hay that ended up on the cover of her Hay House catalog. It's a complicated thing to do, and it takes a lot of time in order to render one of these. But at one point, I was doing this with Jonathan Quinton. I would give him the frequencies for each one. We already had worked out the conversion chart, and he would generate this this diagram. And that became a soundtrack that I produced after that Deepak Chopra thing was over. And so one more thing, because this was a conversion, the conversion sound for the smallest triangle would have the highest frequency, and the largest triangle would have the lowest frequency. So I had a range that I could fit this in. If I took the lowest frequency triangle and put it down at 20 hertz, then all the other triangles frequencies would stack up and be within the range of hearing, 20 to 20,000 hertz, right? Or I could take the smallest triangle with the highest frequency, put it up near 20,000 hertz, and let the other triangles stack downwards. And then it turns out that the range of frequencies from smallest to largest triangles in the Shri yantra allowed me to shift it a few different octaves, 7 octaves to be exact, one for each chakra. So there's an esoteric thing hidden inside the Shri yantra that nobody would ever know about unless you converted it to sound and realized that the sound rendition of the whole diagram could be brought through 7 whole octaves before the smallest triangle went off the top above 20,000 hertz. So that's how I produced this soundtrack in 7 octaves. Because it's a 30-minute soundtrack, each octave lasts for 4 minutes. So you start with this deep, fluid, activating, bone rattling, low frequency rendition of the Shri yantra. And after 4 minutes, all of those 9 triangles plus the circle raises up by 1 octave. And then 4 minutes later, it raises up by another octave and another octave. So down in the depths, it's this incredible, like deep monks chanting and Tibetan bowls slowed down. And as it keeps going up further and further, its whole characteristic changes because each one of those 7 stages is activating another chakra. When you're getting up into this zone, it's like choirs singing and angels, and then it goes into spaceships and sounds like from a sci-fi movie, and then it goes up into this realm that is just difficult to explain. It's of all of the soundtracks I've produced, this is the most enigmatic and most out there. It's definitely not anything what you would expect, because I would get people who would buy this soundtrack and go, I think I'm going to return this because this isn't music. I was expecting music. Other people, particularly from India, would call up and say, this is the most profound meditation I've ever had. You know, because they understand the importance of the Shri yantra, and listening to this experience and knowing that this is a scientific experience, raising you up with an ancient symbol, modernized into sound, is an experience like no other. It's powerful, really, really powerful. So in order to, you know, play some kind of a sample of this, I just took 2 different areas from the low end and from the high end, just to give you an idea of sort of how much it changes at each octave shift. So that's what we're going to do now. Let's headphones on here. This first one is the low register range from a certain section of the low range of the recording. Here we go. And this next one is a section from the higher end. You can see what that was doing, though. I mean, this is really something through the sound chair. Wow, a real experience. Now we're going to do a section from the higher end. So you can sort of see what happens there. You start out at these really low frequencies, and as it rises up and it rises up, it goes straight up your spine and right out the top of your head, as it activates each chakra. But you would never know that unless you had mathematically rendered this symbol into sound. You wouldn't realize that. The other thing that's interesting is that the sound wave frequencies between each of these triangles are an odd relationship to each other. They're not standard harmonics on a musical scale on a piano. They're odd relationships that create these beat patterns. And it turns out that they're all within a critical bandwidth of each other. And a critical bandwidth is how binaural beats are made. When you have two tones that are slightly out of tune within a certain range of each other, your brain can't tell that there's two tones yet. They have to be out of tune by at least a certain amount, 18% critical bandwidth. They have to be outside of that critical bandwidth in order to hear that there's two separate tones. Within that critical bandwidth, your brain can't tell there's two separate tones, so it hears one tone in the middle with a pulsing. That's the difference between the two. And that pulsing causes brain entrainment. And when it's done through headphones, it causes synchronicity of the hemispheres. So when you listen to the soundtrack with headphones, you have 10 different binaural beats generated by the interaction of these 9 triangles and the circle. That's forming a grand brain pattern of entrainment to Shri yantra consciousness. And why it was the Shri yantra was because the state of consciousness it brought you to was the threshold state where you decide what the next moment is going to be. You creating your own reality by managing your expectation of what the universe is here for you to give. That's why this was so powerful. And that's why the soundtrack is one of the most powerful soundtracks I've ever done. Because of the success of this soundtrack, I was approached by the National Labyrinth Association, the Chartres Cathedral Labyrinth, which has its roots in the ancient past with labyrinths like this one. This is the original labyrinth idea. Its big brother became the Chartres Cathedral labyrinth, the ones on the floor of the Chartres Cathedral. These labyrinths, the Chartres labyrinth has been found in all kinds of different places in the world. And you walk the labyrinth, you walk this little path and follow that path as it meanders around back and forth and back and forth. Like you can see here, these people are walking on this path that's going to turn a corner and come back and turn a corner and come back and meander around in a very specific mathematical way that gets closer and further away. And the only way to walk this labyrinth, because the path is so narrow, is to be mindful. So it exercises a mindfulness state of you walking this path, which has got all kinds of deep, spiritual metaphors. So walking the path of the labyrinth is a big deal. And people come from far and wide to Chartres Cathedral to walk the labyrinth that's laid in stone here. So you can see that you enter here and you walk this path that goes straight to the middle and comes around, and it starts going outwards in a funny way. It's a very interesting thing to do. And I was, and so there's this National Labyrinth Association who got hold of the Shri yantra and contacted me to see if I could do the same thing for the Chartres Labyrinth. And this became one of the most complex projects I've ever done, because the math involved in calculating the sound frequency for each of these paths and taking into account these corners. It's also important to realize that a labyrinth is not a maze. A maze is something you could get lost in. A labyrinth has a clear path that is not a trick. You walk this path and you end up in the center, and then you walk back out and you're back out again. You don't get lost anywhere. That's the difference between a puzzle, which is a maze, and a labyrinth, which is a spiritual tool. So here's some of my early calculations. First of all, I had to number all the paths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 paths, and then there's the center. And so you can see that when you first walk in, you're walking into path 5, and then path 6. Then you go into path 11, come out to path 10, path 9, 8, 7. So there's a path sequence. And so once again, because it's contained in a circle, I could use the value of pi for the frequency of pi of 201.0624 hertz, or G plus 43 on a keyboard. That's the value of pi. That's the value of a circle. One of the most primal geometric forms in the universe, deeply recognizable at an unconscious level. And then each of those paths rendered themselves as a certain frequency and a certain keyboard notation and a certain color. The center became a whole new complex thing that I had to calculate. With basically these formulas. Then I had to create the sonic walk pattern of 5, 6, 11, 10, 9, 8. These are the different paths as they weave around so that the order of the sequence of these tones could be correct. And that created the sonic labyrinth, which became a big success worldwide with labyrinth circles. And so I have a little sample of that too, I believe, here. Let's put our headphones on and listen to this for a minute. And people would walk the path of the labyrinth, physically walk the path with headphones on and listening to the soundtrack. Or if you can't get to one of the big paths, you get yourself a picture, and while you're listening to the soundtrack, you move your finger along this path, and you do it that way. And once again, that soundtrack lended itself to being jumped up by octaves. Not quite the same number of octaves, but there's still this hierarchy of moving from grounded to out of your body. Another incredible soundtrack, all based, both of those, on the value of pi, which is a magical number. It's one of the most primal concepts in all of mathematics. There's something very specific and deeply esoteric about the value of pi. It's an irrational number that never ends. So it means that 3.1416, if you don't round it out, it goes forever. Those numbers go forever. They never repeat themselves. It's the relationship of the diameter to the circumference of a circle. And a circle is the most primal geometric form in all of nature and all of mathematics. And all of this value of pi goes back to the Rig Veda. Thousands of years ago in ancient India, they were already calculating the infinite string of numbers that spin from pi. The Rig Veda and solar system before Copernicus, Rig Veda noted the position of the sun, earth, the other planets, the value of pi, the concept of zero. It's like, wow. Thousands of years ago. The main Rig Veda text has a picture of the Shri yantra on it. Full circle. And I used that idea of the full circle, the value of pi, to generate the sound wave of pi as the foundational tone for my Psi Boost soundtrack that used epsilon, which boosts precognitive ability by 373% in a research project we did at California Institute for Human Science. So it's the combination of the value of pi, the value of the circle as a frequency divided right, left, and offset to an epsilon frequency that boosts psychic ability. Again, just sort of another mind blower. And if you, where this all kind of comes together, we'll listen to a couple of seconds of that to the Psi Boost soundtrack. Here we go. And from there, it's to projects that are still on the shelf. The projects on the shelf have to do with other sacred symbols like Gurdjieff's Enneagram, this symbol itself. I already did the sound renditions for the circle, the square, and the triangle. Basic geometric forms that are deeply recognizable at unconscious level. The yin yang and the I Ching. I mean, this goes back to 5,000 years. When previous information was first written down, it already been around for thousands of years before that. this whole concept of the yin-yang symbol forming the female and the male symbols. You double these and you get 4 possibilities. It's called a diagram. You add another one, you have 8 possibilities, or trigrams. Each of these 8 represent one of the grand forces of nature. Then you combine those trigrams together. Here's the top and the bottom trigrams that make the 64 hexagrams. Each of these has a meaning. Each of them, there are 16 of those that form the master points of the compass and the seasons. The grand design of all hexagrams form all kinds of different layers of esoteric information. Once you delve into the I Ching, you've gone down the rabbit hole. But we know that there are 64 codons in DNA matching the 64 hexagrams, and 6 groups of amino acids per codon, which is 6 lines per hexagram. There are so many renditions of how the mathematics of the I Ching match the mathematics of DNA that blows your mind. Once you start delving into these 4 basic bases that form the ladders, the language of DNA, and each of those is one of the 4 diagrams, and you spin those out into trigrams and hexagrams, you have a binary code for amino acids. You can arrange those on a chart where all the amino acids are formed on the wheel of the I Ching, and then you have a possibility of rendering those into sound waves. That each of the 64 hexagrams has 3 sounds for each of the lines of the trigram, and you're connecting trigrams together, which create 6 tones per hexagram. So you have a 6-tone chord for each of the 64 hexagrams, which activates one of the 64 codons of DNA. Project on the shelf to still be done. Each hexagram, by the way, has nuclear hexagrams, has 5 nuclear hexagrams. By taking these 3 lines and then these next 3 lines forms 1 hexagram. This hexagram will be formed by the bottom 3 lines, and then the next 3 lines up, that's another hexagram. So there's these nuclear hexagrams that spin from each hexagram, which means that there's something similar in DNA. So this is a deep exploration that requires more work and time, which is sort of why it's on the shelf, because I've got too many other things going on right now. But this is 5,000-year-old information here that nobody's mined it. All of it waking us up to the esoteric secrets locked into sacred mathematical diagrams, the cosmos, DNA, the quantum field, atomic structure itself, speeding up and slowing down things like nature sounds and the human voice. All of it unlocks a labyrinth itself of information where different pieces and particles that don't seem to be connected are all deeply connected together and reflect each other holographically and in sort of holographic fractal patterns of information. Information that's deeply recognizable at an unconscious level when it's presented properly. And that's the real purpose of all of these esoteric sounds that derive from all these esoteric means of generating sounds from all of this different data. All of it is there to wake up something that's deep and primal in the unconscious mind, the part of the unconscious that designed the original blueprints that reality itself is built from. That's the idea. That's why we're here. That's why we're using sound to delve into these sort of esoteric mysteries and make it real, ground it out into something that's a tool that we can use to wake ourselves up, which is what these have always been about throughout history. They've just gotten lost, not rediscovered. Now we're pulling them out and doing something with them. So that brings us to so we're attempting to align ourselves together to awaken the deepest part of pattern recognition of the deepest level of the unconscious mind that knows how to grow a universe. That's what we're here for today. Let's give that a shot. Mm. So, yes, there is a lot of plans on the shelf to do all kinds of different series of albums coming out. One of those at some point would definitely be a chakra soundtrack, although the Shri yantra already does that. But I would prefer to put out something that is 7 soundtracks, one for each. I'm going to keep this chat going for a little bit longer as usual, and then I'll shift over to the group Discord channel if you want to keep discussion going. For now, thank you all very much for staying with me. I know this was longer than normal. I try to keep within my 1.5 hour thing. Thanks for sticking with me. Peace and blessing and love to everybody. Thank you all for being here with me, and I'll see you next week.